Okay, I'm over at the graveyard house, and I've been walking around looking for inspiration for a project that I've been thinking about doing. I wanted to make a chain. I've been wanting to make a chain for a while. So I came over here just looking for inspiration, looking for something I can turn into a chain. Something that starts out that's not a chain, then becomes a chain. I just want to challenge myself with figuring out how the mechanism goes. I've done some drawings and some research. I have a few ideas. So I'm over here. This would have been the run-in shed for the former farm that was once here. This would have been the shed where they feed the cows. And this would have been a milking barn. This is a milking barn in there. And the cows could have walked through there, but it's all closed up now. Look at that. These might have been in the field. They might have got chewed up in something that cut the grass or something. But there's all this rebar. And I didn't know it was here until I went for a walk. So I think I might start my chain making journey right here with this piece of rebar. Well, there's a lot of it, so I can screw up, start again, try different machines that are going to be able to bend this, or bending jigs really. I could do it on the hydraulic press maybe, I could do it by hand, but I could start by experimenting with all this rebar and see if I could turn it into a chain. And I think the key is coming up with an interesting bending jig. So that's where I'm at, and that's where we're starting right here with all that bent up rebar. Hey, just for the next little bit, if you click the link in the description of this video, I've put together the Duresta Blade Bundle. For a limited time right now, when you purchase the Blade Bundle, you will not only get my Duresta skeleton knife and razor blade, you will also receive an "If It Looks Straight, It Is Straight" poster, hand-signed and letterpressed here in my shop by me. So click the link in the description below, get it while it lasts. And as always, thank you very much for the love and support, and find me on Patreon for exclusive content. I just ran around and I grabbed some scraps that I have around the blacksmith shop and the machine shop. And based on the sketches that I've done in my notebooks, I want to make sure we have a nice strong base. This is going to be the base for the bending jig, and these two arms I just cut on the bandsaw. I'm going to put a hole in a hole, and then I have a 3/4 inch rod, and this is going to be two bendy arms that are going to pull the chain link around. That's the theory. So right now what I'm going to do is set this up in the Bridgeport here. I'm going to drill a hole and then also drill a hole in the two arms, and we're going to do a bendy situation. We're going to start with that and then see where it goes. Testing, trial and error, that's what I like to do. So I'm drilling this. The speed is probably a little too high, but I'm pecking at it. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on it. I'm just letting the cutting head just slowly find its way. And you got to peck. The most important thing is you don't overheat that cutting head. If you overheat that cutting head, it's over. So right now I'm taking a peck, As soon as you're not putting friction on it, it starts to cool. You don't want to get it to that critical heat where you're going to lose the hardening. And I just came through the other side. Now I put some marks on there. The space between has to at least be the thickness of a link, because that's going to have to live here while I bend around it. So every when I bend, I add a link onto it, and it's going to have to live here. So the width between has to be at least the width of a link, and that's a ½ inch. Just gently pushing down. Go down and peck. There's no rush. I consider the Bridgeport the table saw of any machine shop. It is the one machine you must have. It's good for drilling. You could do slotting. You could do all kinds of things with it. It is one of the most critical machines you need if you're going to have a proper machine shop, which I have a half-assed machine shop. Between inside here and the blacksmith shop, I can get a lot done. This needs to be skimmed just a little bit to fit in there, but that's going to be perfect. Here I have one of the bending arms in here, and I have this stopper, so I can do both of them with the same space here. Here we go. This is going to be the pivot pin and also the pin that the link bends over. I have to trim it a little bit. And right now I did a little test cut and the feed is too fast. So I'm going to change the feed right now. The gear is pushed in, the lever's to the right. And so now we're at 22. So I want to go higher. So I'm going to have to, gotta pull this out. I got to pull the gear out so it engages a different set of gears. I'm there, and I have to turn it on a little bit to get that to do it. But then I'm going to go from 22 to 44. So the feed will be a much finer feed, so I'll get a finer cut. So there's my cut, and I put my feed. So my cut is much finer. I'm getting a much finer cut. I'm going to run about 2 inches of this, and then I'll see if it fits into the other holes. This is the lever you hold for the power feed. That's turning. And then you get a nice consistent feed so your cut looks smooth. And the reason I turned it to a finer, that would have been threads per inch, so that's what that is. That's 44 threads per inch, or technically just a finer cut. So it's a semi-loose fit, but then again, I'm not making an engine here. We're making a bending jig. So as long as that just bends around that fairly easily, that's all I need. I'm going to run about 6 inches of this so that I could use it for both sides of the bending jig. And then I'm going to have to curve that edge, and I'm going to use this pin to curve that edge. Reliable band. There's the pin. I have it there in a V block, and that'll go on there, and let's see what happens. I did a little test. It's not perfect, but it's good enough for a bending jig. Here we are. Both sides are bending, but now I'm starting to realize I don't have anywhere to hold because the levers are going to be in the same place where I thought I was going to have some holding. So I might have to cut out a large port of these arms and have this offset. So I'm going to have to take a lot of material out of right here. So I'm going to work on that right now. I got the bending bars are going to come around 180. 180. I took out some of this material just now with the big cutting head. And if we come back here, I've made some room. Got that, and I'm going to put a peg right there, and that peg is going to hold during the bending. And then I still have to put a stopper and a stopper. And that's what's going to force this to bend around each one of these pegs. Here's the material that's going to become our lengths. I'm leaving it a little tight so I could file it out later. And then once I drill that down, I'm going to grab these arms and pull them against the cutting head just to make clearance on the arms. I made some clearance, but not quite enough. All right, let's see what happens. Get out. Come on. I just drilled that hole. These will all get welded in. That's going to get welded in. That's going to get welded in. That's going to get welded in. This is going to be able to pull around and bend the lengths around these. I'm going to make these a little bit thinner on the lathe. Right now, I don't have enough clearance right here. If I thin these up by just maybe a 50 thou, maybe even less, I'll be able to pull that around. There we go, making the tools to make the chain.
I still have two options. I can bend around the previous link that I made, or I can keep this peg in place and bend one link at a time. I won't know until I experiment a little bit with it, but one, I'll have to connect links one at a time together after I bend the shape, and the other one I'll be able to form a link, insert the rod into it, and then form another link right around it. But in time, I'll figure that out.
All right, this is all still very hot from welding, which doesn't matter because I'm about to open up the torch to do a test bend. I actually see me putting these into the forge so they come out bright red. It'll just make it all that much easier to bend. And I'm still not sure if I need this piece or not. That's why I'm making this piece interchangeable at the moment, because these two bending blocks fighting each other might be enough to keep the loop in place. If I do one and then the other, I'm not sure. We're going to do it right now. I'm going to do a test. I'm going to heat that up cherry red, bend one, then bend the other, and just kind of do a test on the ultimate length that we need. It's not too bad for the very first shot. Now you could imagine if these were red hot, coming right out of the oven. The right length. This is exactly 6 inches. I seem to need to cut about a ½ inch off. So I'll get that length dialed in. I realized I got these sharp edges, which is constricting me, pulling it around. So I'm going to soften those edges so that it doesn't dig in as much. It'll roll on those edges, but not bad. Just like I envisioned in my notebook. It's a little janky. I mean, hydraulic press will probably get it faster, but this is better for me to understand how the process works.
That is the piece trimmed back to 5½ inches, so from now on all the pieces will be cut to 5½ inches.
Now I want to see if the jig is big enough to hold one bent up link, which came out pretty good, while I bend another link around it, because that's kind of key. Otherwise I'm going to have to hand bend them. But let's see if I can do this. This is definitely going to take some work. I think the blacksmith forge will help a lot of this because I can keep this cool and keep these hot.
Okay, this is my third link ever, connecting after those first two in the shop, and it's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with the results, but as I keep testing it, I'm realizing that the links aren't quite the shape that I want. They're not that perfect racetrack shape. The side that has the previous link in it doesn't have any pushback. And while everything is red hot, it's susceptible to bend in any direction. And so once I get a little bit of sort of I call it the humpback on the opposite side of the joined part of the link, there's nothing for me to do to hammer that flat again. So I make a bunch of links, just assuming no one's going to notice that. Only I could see it. And you do see some work has to go into closing the loop up and tightening it up a little bit. And it's funny, I bought this hammer at a garage sale or at the flea market, and it is the perfect hammer. It almost feels like a chain link hammer. I don't know if you noticed there that I just broke that. That is because I let it cook too long in the oven, and that's when I realized I can't put 7 or 8 pieces in there and just let them cook, or at least not at that temperature. I started experimenting with turning the forge down, and I put bricks in front of the forge to keep the heat contained. I controlled the heat by sliding the bricks open, and then also just turning down the pressure on the gas tank. Occasionally I got a link like this one where the join was a little too off center. I kept it in there because it would get disguised ultimately. Because when you look at the final piece, you're looking at, I don't know how many 100 links, but you're not looking at the individual links. And when you step back, and if the whole texture of the chain starts to take on its own uniform shape, then I'm not too worried. Here you see me using a railroad spike. I put it inside the pick to try and get rid of those humpbacks, but it was a lot of work because once I hammered out the humpback, the railroad spike is stuck inside the chain link. And I started to think, there's got to be a different way. Let me try it with just the peg in place. Here you see I kind of got a rhythm by the evening, being able to put in 4 or 5 at a time at a certain temperature, and then be able to grab 1 or 2, put 1 or 2 back. But you could see here, this is just a simple forge. And so now I'm beginning to make the links on their own, and they're coming out perfectly uniform. It's just going to take me a little bit longer. I'm going to have to take them over to the other shop with the oxy torch, twist them, connect them, and twist them and connect them. But I'm much happier with the uniformity. Since this is just a job of me just having fun and learning, it's not all that complicated to take a little bit extra time. Now, if I had to make hundreds of feet of chain, I would certainly figure out a jig, maybe even an automated jig. Maybe the hydraulic press could be the answer. Something to minimize the amount of work each link takes once it's made. But considering this is just a couple-day project, and by the way, from beginning to end, from me standing in the back of my barn cutting up the rebar to the finished chain hanging on the pillars at the end of the video, was 2 days, start to finish. This one went a lot quicker than I thought. By making them individual, I put them here in the vise, I heat them up with the oxy, I twist them, and I put the links on. So I've been connecting, I'll twist a link and connect 2, 3 together at a time, and then I'll melt another link and connect it. Oxyacetylene torches are really good to have. You can get thousands of degrees focused immediately. I got to be careful, I don't want to bend on one little pivot. I want to heat up at least about 3/4 of an inch. I want that twist to be inside of a lot of that metal. Otherwise it'll just break right off. So I try and get at least 3/4 of an inch, or it's about an inch red hot. And that's it. I can keep going very fast. But each one of these links was bent individually and then put on just like that. And I think it looks much more accurate. For a homemade chain, it's not bad.
Okay, I've been working at this all day. I have this most recent piece that I made and this long piece I've been adding to all day, and I'm about to connect them, and I think I'm going to get about 14 feet of chain. And with that, I got the full length. Let's pull it out and take a look. Basically about 14 feet. Thank you.